Harry may leave Montecito and move to Florida.
Her first to-the-camera confessional for the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan, which launched its first 3 episodes on Thursday, but the duo seemed to have a very clear focus for the 6-part series.
The silence was never mercy, it was never weakness, and it was never dignity. The silence was a countdown. For years, the world asked the same question. Why doesn't the heir respond? Why does he let the Spares camp leak, accuse, rewrite history, and publicly humiliate the institution without striking back? They said it was restraint. They said it was tradition. They said it was never complain, never explain. That was the lie, because behind closed doors, the heir wasn't staying silent, he was building a case. And now the order has been given, not to lawyers, not to courtiers, not to palace advisors trained to smooth scandals under velvet rugs. This order went somewhere darker. Private, international, off the books. A firm that doesn't clean reputations, it dismantles narratives. This isn't damage control. This isn't PR. This is a forensic hunt. Every claim, every missing year, every unexplained dollar, every contradiction buried under sympathy interviews and glossy documentaries. The mandate was reportedly brutal in its simplicity. Find the truth. Find all of it. Bring it to me. This is the moment the enforcer enters the story, not as a brother, not as a son, but as the future of the crown itself. Because what the heir believes now is chilling, the institution didn't fail by accident. It failed out of fear. Fear of backlash. Fear of headlines. Fear of being labeled something unforgivable. And in that fear, the gates were left open.
But there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race.
The Duchess didn't crash the palace. She walked straight in. The heir remembers the warning he gave long before the vows, before the cheers, before the fairy tale branding took over the world. Slow down. Learn who she really is. That warning wasn't jealousy. It wasn't arrogance. It was instinct. Something didn't line up. The stories were polished, but the gaps were loud. The innocence felt rehearsed. The camera always seemed to know where she'd stand. And now, years later, watching the interviews, the accusations, the monetized trauma, the heir isn't confused anymore. He's furious. Not just at her, at everyone who stayed quiet. Because the investigation he's authorized doesn't start with feelings, it starts with money. Who funded the Great Escape? Who paid for the security, the estates, the legal offensives? Why did the numbers never quite balance? Forensic accounts are now following trails designed to disappear, shells within shells.
Pop up for a minute, and they go, gotta make that go away. But there's real estate. On a website homepage, there is real estate there. On a newspaper front cover.
Consulting fees that consult nothing. Charitable flows that never quite reach the ground. The second pillar is time. The missing years. The stretches of life that don't exist on URSIMs or interviews. The cities that come up too often in whispers. The relationships that are never explained, only avoided. This is where NDAs once provided safety. They don't anymore. Private investigators don't respect silence. They respect leverage. And the heir has leverage no one else on earth possesses, the future of the crown itself. Late nights at the estate are no longer quiet. The let's stay on. Folders multiply. The heir doesn't rage. He doesn't shout. He listens. Receipts matter now. Witnesses matter. Paper matters. Because the third pillar isn't about money or time. It's about people. Staff who vanished. Careers that ended abruptly. Voices that cracked in private but never reached the record. The old reports were sealed to keep peace. This investigation tears seals off. No palace HR. No internal mediation. External interviews. Statements logged. Patterns mapped. What emerges is not chaos. It's consistency. A strategy built on ambiguity, on fear, on the belief that no one would ever dare pull the thread. But someone has. And the net is already tightening. Questions are being asked in places far from the palace gates. Archives reopened. Names cross-checked against dates that shouldn't align, but do. The Duchess believes the quiet from the crown means victory. That assumption may be her final mistake. Because silence, when used correctly, isn't surrender, it's stalking. The heir isn't trying to win a public argument. He's writing the historical record. What terrifies everyone involved is this. Once the Jay-Z is complete, it doesn't matter who cries louder. It doesn't matter who controls the headlines. Facts don't negotiate. And the heir isn't building this file for today. He's building it so that 50 years from now, when history asks what really happened, there is only one answer. The investigation has been active for days, and already the first contradictions have collapsed. Not in interviews, not in documentaries, on manifests, on ledgers, in places where stories can't perform, and the investigators are now signaling something ominous. What began as a financial and reputational audit is drifting somewhere far more dangerous. Toward legitimacy, toward succession, toward questions the Crown has never wanted asked out loud. The heir knows once this door opens, it can never be closed again. But he also knows something else. If the truth isn't confronted now, it will rot the institution from the inside, so he doesn't hesitate. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about survival. The moment the investigation pivoted, the temperature inside the palace changed. This was no longer about reputation. It was no longer about leaks, interviews, or bruised egos. It was about legitimacy. The investigators didn't announce the shift. They never do. They simply stopped asking why and started asking how timelines overlap when they shouldn't, how official records felt incomplete, how the same questions kept circling one word the palace avoids at all costs: verification. The heir understood immediately what this meant. You can forgive scandal, you can survive embarrassment, but you cannot survive doubt about the bloodline. Because once doubt enters succession, it doesn't whisper, it multiplies. The private firm returned with a preliminary briefing, and the language had changed. No longer speculative, no longer cautious. This was structural. They laid out patterns that, when isolated, meant nothing, but together formed something chillingly deliberate. Dates that moved, signatures that never appeared, witnesses who were never present when they should have been. The births that were celebrated publicly suddenly looked administratively strange. Why the rush? Why the secrecy? Why the refusal of standard procedures that had been followed for generations? Privacy was the excuse, but privacy doesn't erase protocols. The heir didn't need convincing. He'd been watching the anomalies pile up for years, dismissed publicly, debated privately, and now finally examined professionally. This is where the investigation crossed a line no royal inquiry had crossed before. They began building a verification chain. Not gossip, not rumor, not opinion. Chain of custody, chain of documentation, chain of biological certainty. Because under the ancient rules that still govern the institution, inheritance is not symbolic. It is literal, born of the body, witnessed, recorded, confirmed. Anything else is affection, not succession. The heir's legal counsel warned him what would happen next if he continued. This path doesn't end with clarification, it ends with consequences. There would be backlash, accusations, claims of cruelty. But the heir already knew the truth no one says out loud. A crown that refuses to verify itself doesn't deserve to survive. So he authorized the next step, a formal recommendation. Not public, not announced. A mechanism that had existed for centuries but had never been used in modern times. A verification protocol. Simple, clean, binary. Present proof or lose claim. No speeches, no debates, no televised tears. And this is where panic began to leak through the cracks. Because those who know they're telling the truth welcome verification. Those who don't, delay. Excuses started circulating quietly. Lawyers speaking in circles. Requests for extensions. Claims of harassment. The press sensed something shifting but couldn't name it yet. The heir watched the clock. Deadlines don't negotiate. When the window closed, the absence said more than any confession ever could. There was no presentation, no compliance, no confirmation, just silence. And silence in this context is not neutrality, it is refusal. At exactly 1 minute past the deadline, the palace didn't issue a statement. They did something colder. They updated the record. No drama. No announcement, just an administrative correction that rewrote history in a single refresh. Names were removed, titles quietly dissolved. Language adjusted from certainty to absence. The effect was nuclear. The world noticed within minutes. Social media exploded not with outrage, but shock. Because this wasn't punishment. It was erasure. The institution hadn't argued. It hadn't defended itself. It had simply withdrawn recognition. And once recognition is withdrawn, there is nothing left to litigate. The heir didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He sat alone and stared at the file that had cost him his brother. Because now came the hardest part. What happens to despair when the story he built his life around collapses? The meeting was private. No cameras, no witnesses. Just two men raised together and separated by truth. The heir didn't accuse. He didn't shout. He slid the documentation across the table and let the silence do the damage. The spare read slowly, then again, and again. The realization wasn't explosive. It was hollow, everything he defended, everything he'd sacrificed, everything he'd burned bridges for, built on something that couldn't stand up to verification. The heir didn't offer comfort. Comfort would have implied this was accidental. It wasn't. This was strategy. The Spare asked only one question: what happens now? The answer was brutal in its simplicity. Reintegration, quietly. Rehabilitation, privately. No restoration of status. No return to prominence. Survival, not celebration. As for the architect of the narrative, the fallout was immediate and merciless. Support evaporated, contracts paused, allies vanished, not because of orders, because power hates exposure. The moment verification entered the chat, everyone who benefited from ambiguity fled. And then came the final legal maneuver: not divorce. Annulling requires proving fraud at the foundation, which, according to the DayZ, now sealed in the archives, was no longer debatable. If material facts were misrepresented to secure position, protection, or privilege, the union was void from inception, not ended, never valid. That distinction matters. It strips everything: titles, claims, settlements. The crown doesn't punish grifters, it unrecognizes them. The heir knew history would not remember this kindly. But history doesn't reward kindness. It rewards clarity. The files were sealed, the investigators dismissed, the protocol archived with a single instruction: do not reopen for 100 years. Because this wasn't about today's headlines, it was about preventing tomorrow's collapse. The institution survived, scarred, hardened, but intact. The Spare retreated from public view. The story evaporated into irrelevance. And the heir stood where he always had, alone, steady, burdened. He didn't destroy the crown, he immunized it. This is how modern dynasties survive, not through charm, not through silence, but through verification. Because stories can lie, timelines can lie, people can lie, but facts, once tested, do not.